Now, Michael Hanlon is the Director of Research for the Foreign Policy Program at the Brookings Institution. He joined us earlier from Washington, D.C. Michael, welcome to Arise America. Thanks so much for coming on. There's so much to talk about with this mess that continues to get even more complicated in this crisis in Iraq. Let's start with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry's visit. He met with Nouri al-Maliki as well as other leaders in the country. Was the purpose of the meeting or the purpose of the trip to bring assurance, to put pressure on al-Maliki to actually create an inclusive government, or something else? What do you make of it?
I think it was primarily about applying pressure. I don't think that reassurance was the first goal, because the United States has made it clear, and I think the U.S. position is correct, that unless Maliki becomes much more inclusive, there is no way we can reassure anybody in Iraq. There's no military solution to a problem that's fundamentally caused by politics and by the fact that virtually all Iraqi Sunnis are united against Maliki. They're even willing to work with al-Qaeda, with this ISIS group, as opposed to supporting their own government. And that reflects a fundamental breakdown in any effort at cooperation across Sunni-Shia lines in Iraq. So I think Secretary Kerry's clear first priority was to try to change that by creating or prodding Maliki and others to create a more inclusive Iraqi government. I think it should begin, by the way, with Maliki stepping down. But I realize it's hard for the United States to engineer that. Yeah, the United States can't engineer that. In fact, the president has said that Iraq has to be governed by itself. However, Michael, what's the likelihood that al-Maliki will comply with having a coalition government? The United States has been encouraging him to do this all along. Would this trip really make the difference? Great point. You know, there are two ways you hope that you can persuade Maliki. One is just look at the evidence, Mr. Prime Minister. Your country's fracturing along ethnic lines and sectarian lines. You clearly are not pulling it off. And whether it's your fault or not, your fellow Iraqis are not following you. They're not interested in working with you. They're interested in fighting against you. His reputation and his nickname now in Iraq have descended so low, he's called the Shia Saddam by many Sunni. So that indicates where things are, and you can try to persuade him that he's now lost any ability to really rally the country. You can do it in sweeter words by trying to say, listen, you've already served 2 terms as prime minister. Your party just won a 3rd term. Why don't you let somebody else in your party have that term? That way you can leave power as the father of Iraqi democracy. You will have been the person who passed off power through elections, in addition to whatever else you've accomplished or failed to accomplish. So that's one way, is appealing to his head. But the other way is to appeal to his pocketbook and point out, listen, our aid, and certainly any future American military support, will depend on whether you create a government that we can believe in. There's no point in our wasting American dollars or risking American lives, even in a more limited way than before, on military operations that have no chance of success. And so you try to use your leverage. You try to use your negotiating chips. I don't know if it's going to work. I don't rate our chances as better than 50-50, but I think that's how you start. And if you fail, if he refuses to govern in an inclusive way, then you have to limit your military help and your economic help. Yeah, which of course is the position so far of the United States. Well, let's just say the glass is half full and Maliki does decide to step aside. Who would be in the best position to take leadership? Well, it's a good question. I think there are a few Iraqis. There are a couple of good Kurdish leaders, Foreign Minister Zabari, or the guy who runs Kurdistan up now in the north, Barham Saleh, who used to be in Baghdad as one of the key figures in the government there. And then you've got a couple of pretty good Sunni, although I doubt the Shia would tolerate a Sunni leader. It would remind them of Saddam. But there's a guy named al-Issawi, who used to be deputy prime minister, who's very, very good. And Maliki went after him a little bit, tried to arrest him, but I'm convinced there was no basis for those charges. And then within the Shia ranks, there are a couple of good leaders. you hear various names. Some of them make me laugh more than they make me feel inspired. But one person who I think is good is a guy named Mahdi, or al-Mahdi, and he was a former high official as well. So I think there are such people. But it's not just the figurehead at the top or the prime minister at the top. It's creating the coalition, bringing in people from different sectarian groups and empowering them to have a real share of the control of the country. That's equally important.
One more very quick question, because we really are almost out of time, Michael, and that is, you suggested in a recent article column that you wrote for USA Today that perhaps there should be created autonomous regions for these different ethnic groups, and so that would split Iraq essentially in three: a Shia area, a Sunni area, and then of course the already autonomous region for the Kurds. Wouldn't that make this already predictable, unwieldy situation even more unpredictable and unwieldy?
Well, it could have done wrong. And I would agree enough with the premise behind your question to say that this kind of federalism or soft partition can only work if everyone buys into it. You can't have it be just done in frustration or anger by one group walking away. There are too many populations that are still intermixed and interspersed. There are too many families that are mixed in Iraq. And so it only succeeds if indeed there is cooperation and agreement among all the different Iraqi political leaders that this is the least bad option they can think of at this point.
Yeah, we are looking for the lesser of all the evils at this point. Michael Hanlon, thank you so much. Good to see you.
My pleasure. Thanks to you.